We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I thought I might kick off the October month with a review of something that's not really a horror novel, but kind of edges into the territory just a little bit. This is definitely a darker work, a kind of macabre piece of fiction. And it is actually my second experience reading Shirley Jackson, the first and other being The Haunting of Hill House, which I really, really love. But I wanted to read this book because I had heard that this is the book that is considered to be her masterpiece. This is the last thing she ever wrote before her rather untimely death, and this is considered by a lot of people to be her magnum opus. So, uh, right up front, I disagree strongly with that assessment. This did not measure up to me to the standard of The Haunting of Hill House. Now, I have one more Shirley Jackson book over here on the shelf to get to. That would be The Sundial, which I hope to get to at some point. So we'll see where this book ultimately ends up falling. But as of right now, this did not measure up at all to The Haunting of Hill House. In fact, this book was, dare I say it, kind of a disappointment to me. So let's get into it. Let's see what the issues were that I had with We Have Always Lived in the Castle. What is We Have Always Lived in the Castle about? Well, it is a work of, I suppose, neo Gothic, uh, which is narrated by one Mary Catherine Blackwood, or nicknamed Mary Cat Blackwood, a uh, severely emotionally retarded child psychopath who is uh, a very unique narrator. There is a very unique narrative voice throughout this book, and that is really the book's main strength. I'll say that. There's no real complaint about the way this book is told because the way that Shirley Jackson conveys this story through the eyes of this one very strange and eccentric character really does lend a very significant atmosphere to this story. But this book is set in an undisclosed time period in what I assume is a New England village. I say that because they actually use the word village in this, and I can't speak for all of America, but I've never heard the word village used around where I live. It's just town or city. I think that's kind of more of a New England thing. So I take it that this is set in New England. I assume in like the 1950s or something, or maybe contemporaneously to when this book was written, which was in the early 1960s. And the Blackwood family, or what remains of the Blackwood family, lives in a large, kind of foreboding estate that overlooks a small nameless village, filled with villagers who hate the Blackwood family due to something that they did. So at the onset of the book, there are only three surviving members of the Blackwood family. There is our narrator, Mary Cat, who is presumably relating this story sometime after the fact, and her older sister, Constance, whom she has a strange and borderline sophic fixation with, which is really kind of weird. And then their crippled uncle Julian, who is wheelchair bound. And their family used to be much larger, but somebody poisoned the Blackwoods, and most of them died. However, the prime suspect in the murder was Constance, the older sister here, the elder sister, and she was acquitted. So there's been kind of a a despisal that has kind of fomented in the village due to the evident wealth and kind of snobbery that the Blackwood family displayed, and also because one of the remaining members, is a murderer who did not was not punished for the crime. And this book has virtually no plot, and what little plot it does have, I'm going to spoil, so be aware of that right now up front, because to really get into this book and and the problems that I had with it, I have to talk about some things that will spoil what little plot it does have. So, uh, there's kind of this air, it's an aura of mutual hostility between the villagers, who are of, I guess, a lower social class than the pretty wealthy Blackwoods who live in their house on a hill. And they do not like each other, obviously, because of the wealth disparity, but also because of the murder thing. And the three remaining Blackwood family members have kind of withdrawn entirely from society, and Mary Cat is the only one who goes out. She goes to the village once a week to pick up supplies, and the villagers obviously resent her and resent all of them. But into the picture one day comes Charles Blackwood, a cousin of theirs who is after their fortune and wants to just, slide right in and take that rumored fortune that is somewhere on the grounds of the estate. And so the main conflict of this is kind of Mary Cat's resentment of Charles, because she doesn't trust him, and obviously she shouldn't, because he's just kind of a greedy dick. But uh, Mary Cat is not really normal. I said earlier that she is severely emotionally retarded, and she is also I a practitioner of some form of sympathetic magic, none of which really seems to work. But the way that her mind, she tells us at the beginning of the story that she's 18, I believe, but she could really be like 11 or 12. Very, very stunted emotionally and kind of mentally. And she does all these little weird ritual things to try to make the world work in a certain way that she wants to. And it's pretty obvious to us that this is just complete bullshit that doesn't do anything. But since we're seeing this through her eyes, we kind of understand. It's kind of like an OCD thing almost. Not really, but it's kind of like that just a little bit. She does a bunch of crap, magical crap that doesn't serve much purpose, but she thinks it does. And her older sister Constance, who she is like fixated on, is basically an agoraphobic recluse who never comes out. She's very afraid of the world, and their uncle Julian, the only other member who survived the poisoning, is not only handicapped now due to being poisoned, but also very, like, he has, I guess, dementia or something. He's very mentally unsound as well. And so this entire family, or what remains of it, is extremely eccentric and kind of oddball. But Charles is obviously the most level headed one, because he just wants the money. But there's a lot of friction between him and Mary Cat, and you think that's going somewhere, but then, oh no, the house catches on fire, and that actually becomes the crux of the book. Their house catches on fire, and then the villagers come to their house and put out the fire, but then proceed to demolish their house. And then it's revealed that the murderer of the family, the person who poisoned the Blackwood family, is actually the narrator herself, Mary Cat, as if you couldn't see that coming from a mile away, because this little girl desperately needed a spanking. Like, seriously, that's a kind of a hot button issue. Should you spank your kids? You damn sure better spank your kid if they're like this kid, because the girl in this book is unbearable. But also, she is like legit. Like, she's probably clinically insane, because she's very emotionless. And I mean, she murdered almost her entire family. And it's kind of implied that she did that so that she could kind of have Constance all to herself. Again, there's almost kind of like a lesbian kind of possessive love kind of vibe there. It's kind of weird, but So it's revealed that she poisoned the family and killed everyone as though you didn't know that basically from the start. And then they go back to living in their now partially ruined house that is, again, partially burned. And that's the end of the book. That is, we have always lived in the castle. This was, I suppose, a good adjective I would use to describe this book would be pointless. And I don't, it's a kind of a shaky ground because I don't think that every book has to have a point. Or maybe they do, it's just that the point doesn't have to be something grandiose. If you're reading a thriller novel, the point of the book, the purpose of the book is to thrill you, to excite you, to keep you on the edge of your seat. If you're reading a horror novel, the purpose of the book is to scare you. Something that Shirley Jackson really knocked out of the park with The Haunting of Hill House, which I think is probably her masterpiece because it show ain't this. And you get the point. But this book doesn't really seem to have a point. It's it has some undercurrents that I will touch on, but it never really felt like it was doing anything. And Shirley Jackson is first and foremost a psychological author. That is really what she's known for, is the way that she can get inside the heads of very outre kind of characters, kind of outsider characters, and really portray that kind of psychology in a very convincing manner. That's partly why The Haunting of Hill House is such a just a knockout book, because it's not just a story about a haunted house, even though it is a damn fine haunted house story, probably the greatest. It's also the story of a very sheltered and repressed young woman whose psyche is unraveling after being placed into a environment that is basically demonic. And so it's actually like that book is a haunted house story, but underneath that, it's actually a character study of a woman losing her grip on reality. It's a lot to unpack in that book, kind of. Again, there are some other kind of sophic undertones in that book a little bit. And Shirley Jackson's books are not overtly sexual, but there is a simmering undertone and under flavor kind of sexuality that's never at the forefront but always palpable in the background. And it's that works in this book too, because there are definitely some weird vibes going on between these sisters in this book. But um, this book had some undercurrents. It had some things that were happening in the background. Mainly, this I think a lot of people say that this is a work of like feminist literature, that it has a strong feminist thrust to it. Um, that might be an unintentional pun or unintentional, an unintentional pun with using the word thrust like that. Anyway, I digress. But I've heard that this is kind of like a quiet, subdued work of feminist literature, and I don't think that's unfounded at all. But A, I don't think it's a very good work of feminist literature, and B, again, what was the ultimate point here? So the main issue, if there is an issue in this book, is kind of female oppression and the desire to kind of break free from the shackles and fetters of society of that time period absolutely did place on women. And if you know me, you know that my fourth favorite book of all time is Kate Chopin's The Awakening. So by all rights, I should really be lapping that crap up, because that's my kind of thing. It's not just a feminist thing, it's because I like to see people who are put upon for no good reason resist that and strive to go their own way. I love stories like that. And so I thought this book would be right up my alley, but it wasn't, because again, I don't think it's a very good work of feminist literature, because these women are not really very empowering, and they're not very good people. That's the difference, I guess, between like The Awakening, because in that book, Edna Pontellier is just a normal woman who wants more than what life is affording her, and so she tries to better her life by her own hands. In this book, it's you have a deranged little child psychopath who destroys property with no regard for anything and has no conscience whatsoever and is, I know, literally like insane basically. It's unspoken, but it's there. She's definitely not sane. And then you have the agoraphobic dish rag that can't do anything on her own. And that never changes. That's the problem. Nothing ever changes. Like it reinforces, like at the ending of this book, where they just go back to their life and they're like ridiculously happy now that they live in their trashed house, uh, with nothing, with not having to go out and do anything. They can just retreat. I mean, I guess maybe that was the point, if it had one, is that the only solace that women could find in society of that time was to retreat from it. But A, I don't think that's probably the healthiest outlook to have. And B, again, these are not characters you really want to emulate. They're not role models. Actually, not a single character in this book did I give any kind of a crap about. And no one in this book, or almost nobody, acted like a normal human being. Again, our narrator is insane. Our the only well, the other major character, Constance, is severely damaged psychologically. The uncle is also deranged in a different way. The only character who actually acted normally in this book was Charles Blackwood, the greedy cousin who was just trying to worm his way into their affections to get the inheritance. And honestly, you're not supposed to root for him because obviously he's a greedy kind of prick who just wants their money. But you know what? He was actually the closest thing to a character in this book that I actually liked because at least I understood him. Like, at least he was doing something. It may not have been good or right, but at least he was proactive. The other characters are just doing a whole lot of nothing. But then we also come to the conflicts of this book. And the conflicts of this book I had some problems with. So a conflict is generally what drives a plot. And the conflicts in this book, the main conflict of this book is that which exists between the Blackwood family, or the remains of the Blackwood family, and the village whom they exist on the fringes of. And it was really contrived and it was never convincing. Okay, so let me explain. So at the onset of this book, Mary Cat, the narrator, informs us that the villagers hate them, that they've always kind of hated them because they have much more money. And that's another thing. I've heard people say that this is like some kind of subtle commentary on class differences and wealth inequality. Again, if it is, I would say it is a very bad example of it because it makes the lower class people not you don't root for anybody in this book, but you don't you the what the villagers end up doing is like you I would not have done that if I was trying to write a book about wealth disparity. I just wouldn't have done it that way. So I think this book fails in certain ways if it was indeed trying to do what people say it was. But so we have the villagers hate the Blackwoods because the Blackwoods are a lot wealthier than them, and they are snobbish, and they fenced off their land, and they're like, nobody comes on this land, it's ours. Which I guess, I mean, that's their right, but they're kind of aloof, and they're really, really aloof and stuck up. So the villagers resent them with that. But then they resent them because of the murder thing too, and that just didn't really. I thought that was a really contrived way to set up enmity between these two parties, because I can understand people resenting somebody because they have more money. That happens every day. But if you already hate those people, then why would you care if they all died by arsenic? Like, I don't understand. Like, they hate the remaining Blackwood people who they already hated. They hate the few that remain because they killed the other Blackwood family members, which they also hated. Like, why? you know, it's like that enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. I just don't understand the circuitous logic you would have to use to make that be as powerful of a resentment as it apparently is. But then at the climax of this book, if this book can be said to have a climax, when their house is on fire, the village fire department comes to put out the fire, and they do. They put out the fire, but then all the villagers proceed to throw rocks at their house and break their windows, and then they go inside and like break all the chairs and furniture and all the dishes. And I'm like, what? I mean, if you hated them that bad, why didn't you just let the house burn? Like, I don't understand the actions of nearly any character in this book. You hate these people. These people killed themselves, so somehow you hate them more. And then when the people who you hate, when their house is on fire, you then put out the fire, but then proceed to destroy the house. Why would you not just let the house burn down if you hate these people that much? It just felt really contrived, and it was never really convincing to me. And yeah, I just had some problems with this book. I was not really a fan of this book. I didn't hate it. I mean, it was only 146 pages, not counting the afterword by Jonathan Latham. Uh, I mean, it wasn't a big time investment, thankfully, but I did not really enjoy it. I didn't really understand what it was trying to do, if it was indeed trying to do anything, and if it was trying to do the things that other people say it was trying to do, I think it actually failed. And I disagree vehemently with anyone who says that this is Shirley Jackson's finest work. It is not by my standards. I think The Haunting of Hill House is an absolute stone cold, bone chilling masterpiece of uh, both regular horror and psychological horror. This book is a whole lot of nothing. It's characters you don't care about acting in ludicrous and non incomprehensible ways, clashing with villagers who resent them far more than they have any real reason to, and it all culminates in something that didn't really make sense to me. So, yeah, we have always lived in the castle. To rate this book, I would give it a C. It's not by any means the worst thing I've ever read, but it fell far short in my estimation of it fell far short in my estimation, far shorter than The Haunting of Hill House, which was a much better experience. But yeah, we have always lived in the castle by Shirley Jackson. Have you read We Have Always Lived in the Castle? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it. I'm sure you probably could, because there are um, loads of people out there who appear to just adore this book, and honestly, I can't say as I understand why. I mean, the real strength of this book is the way it's narrated, because Shirley Jackson demonstrates her impeccable grasp of kind of outsider psychology and uh, how to portray the mind of a very mentally off person. So there's no complaints in that regard. Although I will say that it made the main character, our narrator, very unsympathetic and not really likable. But it does have some strengths, but not nearly as many as Hill House did. So yeah, I don't think this book measures up at all. But yeah, if you think it does, if you think I'm wrong, you can let me know. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to like, subscribe, help the channel out a little bit. I would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, peace.